Today, we are tackling something that is just dominating American political discourse, the crisis of affordability. And look, we're not just talking about the temporary sting of inflation here. This is a much deeper structural challenge. It's affecting a huge portion of the population, really anyone outside the top 10% of wealth holders. The sources we're looking at call this group the coalition of the precariat. We're talking about people often young, often college educated, who are just crushed by stagnant wages and debt. They've lost that fundamental expectation of, upward mobility. And technological disruption, especially with the AI boom on the horizon, is just shaking the very foundation of labor. So our mission today is to look at the response. The traditional fixed tax, the rich redistribute income, is hitting a wall. We're going to explore a really radical alternative, the predistribution of wealth, through an idea called universal basic capital, UBC. It's a completely different way of looking at the American dream.
And that core difference is what's so fascinating. We're really moving the conversation. We're moving away from just treating symptoms, like food assistance or rent relief.
Right.
And we're going toward the actual cause. It's not about temporary safety nets anymore. It's about changing the very pattern of ownership itself. I mean, you just look at the data. The concentration is staggering.
Right.
The top 10% own 93% of all financial market equities.
3%.
Exactly. You can't fix affordability without tackling that head on. So the essential shift here, the metaphor we're tracking, is really simple. If machines are going to generate all the future wealth, then people need to start owning the robots.
That reframing is powerful, from welfare to actual ownership. But let's start with the standard progressive response. I mean, the immediate reflex for a lot of people is just to, tax high earners and redistribute income, things like universal basic income or UBI. So why are our sources saying that's just not enough?
Because it's an interim fix. It's a temporary Band-Aid. It doesn't solve the structural problem. It tries to mitigate the pain of it. UBI, no matter how generous you make it, is still a system of perpetual transfer. It depends on the owners of capital generating enough profit to be taxed, but it does nothing to change that underlying dynamic of wealth concentration, which is just accelerating as we head into this AI era.
And the AI context makes that failure almost inevitable, doesn't it?
Precisely. I mean, think about the old labor paradigm. In the industrial age, labor had bargaining power. You could organize, you could strike.
Human work was essential.
It was essential, and it was hard to replace. But that whole paradigm is becoming obsolete when intelligent machines can do what most humans do. So if the value of human labor starts to diminish really rapidly, I mean, imagine 40% of middle-class jobs just get automated, then funding a huge UBI becomes a serious math problem. The transfer payment would be enormous. It would strain government finances, you get huge tax resistance, and it just wouldn't keep pace with the exponential growth of wealth for the few who own the AI. Income transfers are like trying to fill a bucket that has a massive hole in it. It's just unsustainable.
So if the real issue is that value is shifting from labor income to capital ownership,
Right.
then the fairness people are looking for isn't just about, clipping the fortunes at the very top. It's about actively building ownership from the bottom up.
That is exactly the goal. Systemic equity through widespread ownership, predistribution.
Okay, so if redistributing income is the Band-Aid, then universal basic capital UBC is the proposed structural solution. Can you define that for us? Let's go deeper than just the acronym. The core idea is that everyone gets richer by owning a slice of the pie, right?
It's all about broad participation, shifting the mindset from income replacement to equity sharing. The argument is this. If AI triggers this massive productivity explosion, I mean, like nothing we've ever seen, those gains cannot just go to the 10% who already own everything.
And we've actually seen a key figure in the AI world, Sam Altman from OpenAI, kind of go through this exact shift himself. He started out talking about UBI funded by, a tax on companies.
Yeah, he was suggesting a 2.5% tax on market value paid in shares. But he's moved on from that. He's now advocating for what he calls universal basic wealth, UBC.
Why that change?
Because he realized an income transfer doesn't actually empower anyone. It doesn't change the pattern of wealth. He got focused on the need for a personal compounding stake in the future. His insight was really about the psychology of ownership. He said, and this is a key quote, "What I would want is like an ownership share in whatever the AI creates."
So you feel like you're participating.
Exactly. Participating in something that's going to compound and get more valuable over time. That compounding growth, the tax advantage depreciation of an asset, that's what separates UBC from UBI.
And the rationale for sharing this wealth is so powerful with AI because it's being created with the raw material of, well, our data. Every search, every post, everything we do online is training these models.
It makes the value creation socially generated. It's not a gift from some tech lord. It's a dividend from our collective participation. Because our data is the fuel for this new capital, there's a really strong moral and economic case that the ownership of it should be shared. The wealth is created collectively, so the ownership should be inclusive.
Okay, that is a powerful theory. Let's move this into the real world of policy. And we don't have to just imagine it because our sources point to an embryonic UBC model that's already been established by Congress. It's called the MAGI accounts, money accounts for growth and advancement.
This is a remarkable starting point.
Yeah.
It's real. It's bipartisan. It was established by a Republican-led Congress. It provides for auto-enrollment for every child under 8 who's a citizen. And it starts with a $1,000 deposit.
And these aren't just sitting in a bank account, they're actually invested, right?
Right. They're professionally managed, invested in the market stocks, bonds, and they grow with compounded returns until the kid turns 18.
And families can add more?
They can, up to $5,000 a year. And the withdrawals for things like education or a small business or a home are tax advantaged. It creates an immediate habit of capital ownership.
But there has to be a catch. The funding, maybe?
That's the problem. It's funded right now at about $30 billion a year. But, and this is the critical part, that funding is only secured through 2028. It's mostly from tariff revenues, which are basically just taxes on consumers. It's not a permanent solution.
Which leads directly to the proposed fix from our sources, the productivity levy.
Exactly. A productivity and wealth-sharing levy. The initial proposal is to target the most concentrated source of new wealth, big tech. The idea is a 1% annual levy on the market value of the 5 largest tech companies, and it would be payable in shares.
In shares.
In shares. This would seed the AGA accounts long past 2029 and tie the funding directly to the growth of the AI economy.
Okay, hold on. Let's slow down on the mechanics there because that sounds complicated. The government is taking Google stock as payment. Won't corporate boards just scream about forced dilution? And doesn't that make the funding super volatile?
That's the precise question the sources dig into. And yes, they would pay in shares. The reason is structural. If you take cash, you're getting yesterday's profit. If you take shares, you're capitalizing on tomorrow's growth.
So you ride the wave up.
You ride the wave. There's volatility, sure, but the whole point is to capture assets that are appreciating exponentially. As for dilution, 1% a year is considered relatively small. You'd expect opposition, of course. But the argument is that giving the whole population a tangible stake in the system creates such a massive social benefit, stabilizing your consumer base, your future labor pool, that it justifies that small cost.
And this mechanism, it's designed to be flexible, right? It doesn't have to be just the big 5 tech companies forever.
Absolutely not. The vision is that as AI spreads through the economy, you could broaden the levy and maybe even reduce it. For example, maybe it becomes 0.5% on all businesses worth over $5 billion. The point is, as productivity booms everywhere, the MAGI accounts boom with them. The next generation literally shares in the wealth creation.
And this gets right at a big political attack you always hear, doesn't it? If the state is collecting this, even in shares, people will just yell, socialism.
And that's where the distinction is crucial. This is individualist, not statist. The shares would go through the state only as a collection agency. The state is just the conduit.
Administrator.
The administrator. The money flows directly into private personal accounts, managed by private firms. The state never becomes the owner. Far from being socialist, the whole point of UBC is to make every citizen a capitalist.
Making every citizen an owner, that is a critical reframing. So beyond the MAGI accounts for kids, what are some of the bigger ideas for implementing UBC across the entire adult population? There was one brainstorm about Social Security.
Right. This proposal is centered on creating a huge national sovereign wealth fund, an SWF. The idea is that publicly traded companies over a certain size would contribute, say, 2% of their value in shares each year to this national fund. And the fund would just grow tax-free, compounding over time.
And the way it's distributed to adults has this interesting, almost contractual twist to it. It's not just a handout.
Correct. The proposal suggests every adult American who actively votes gets a synthetic security. It's indexed to the stock market, but you have to let it vest for at least 20 years. So you're locking in long-term growth. And when you withdraw, the capital gains are totally tax exempt.
That actively votes requirement? That sounds like it could be a point of contention. I mean, aren't you tying economic reward to a civic duty? What about things like voter suppression, making it harder for some people to access their wealth?
That is a legitimate challenge. You'd have to design the policy very carefully. But the advocates argue the goal isn't exclusion, it's about reinforcing civic responsibility,
A literal stake in the
a
system.
literal economic and political stake.
Yeah.
And that 20-year vesting period is just as important. It forces long-term thinking. It prevents people from cashing out during a panic.
And we don't have to treat this as just some theory either. We actually have real-world evidence that this kind of national asset building can work. Look at Australia.
The Australian superannuation model is a powerful template. It started back in 1991. It's a mandatory savings scheme where employers have to contribute a percentage of a worker's wages, it's around 11% now, into a retirement fund. And because of that scale and longevity, the fund is now worth $4.2 trillion.
That's just a staggering number. It's more than their entire country's GDP. What's the result for the average Australian?
The results speak for themselves. The average wealth per adult in Australia is among the highest in the world. It's $550,000. It just proves that building these kinds of assets on a national scale isn't some fantasy. It is achievable and is transformative for a country's financial stability.
And politically, this idea seems to have really broad appeal.
It provides crucial common ground. It addresses the core concerns of populists, voices like J.D. Vance and Steve Bannon who are trying to champion the working class. But at the same time, it fulfills the goals of Democrats who are looking for structural ways to restore the American dream. It sort of transcends the normal left-right debate because it's about ownership.
Right. It seems like everyone can agree that people need to feel like they're participating in the system. Now, we should acknowledge that arguments for pure abundance, just making things cheaper by cutting regulations, are valid. But the historical truth is pretty clear. Abundance does not distribute itself fairly.
That is the critical historical takeaway, and it's confirmed by decades of research. Wealth generation, especially during these huge technological shifts, has always needed some kind of institutional intervention to be shared broadly. I mean, this is validated by the Nobel Prize-winning work of Daron Acemoglu, who just got the prize in 2024.
And what's the key takeaway from Acemoglu's work for this conversation?
His research just shows over and over that societies that maintain inclusive institutions, the ones that give opportunity and a share of power to lots of people, they're the ones that prosper for centuries.
Any others?
The others, where wealth and power get highly concentrated, they eventually splinter, inequality rises, and they fail. It's a clear historical pattern. UBC is basically designed to force the inclusion that technology on its own threatens to eliminate.
So the conclusion then is that adopting policies like this for the AI era, it puts America's trajectory back on what Acemoglu calls the right side of history. It makes wealth sharing as normal and accepted as paying into Social Security or Medicare. So to summarize this entire deep dive, UBC is this essential policy shift for the next 2 decades. It's moving away from temporary income transfers, which are just unsustainable, and towards structural wealth ownership. It's about actively turning every citizen into a capitalist who benefits from the compounding growth that's going to be fueled by AI and automation.
Which leaves us with one final provocative thought for you to take away from all this. Given that all this AI productivity is fueled by our collective data, the digital raw material of these systems, what new forms of data ownership or data dividends might emerge? What are some more direct ways to implement UBC that maybe haven't even been proposed yet? I mean, consider the moral and economic implications of living in a world where you are constantly generating enormous wealth with your data, but you get absolutely no corresponding share in it. The ownership structure of the future, that is the great question of our age.